They just don't make IPAs like they used to. Now, I love IPAs. It's my favorite style of beer. Nothing else even comes close. But the ones I fell in love with back in the day, those don't really exist anymore. And I miss them. So I decided to do something about it. IPAs are actually what got me into craft beer in the first place. The first beer I tried was a pale ale. It was Sierra Nevada or Sweetwater 420, one of those. But pretty quickly after that, I found IPAs, and that was it for me. And the timing of it was meaningful. The IPAs I grew up on, I was an adult by then, but you understand, those came from a specific era that we now call the Hop Wars. And if you don't know what that means, the Hop Wars was a time about a decade ago, maybe a little more, when breweries were trying to cram as much bitterness into a beer as physically possible. Every beer had an IBU number on the label. It was the marketing scheme of the time. And breweries were trying to pump that number up as high as it would go, sometimes over 100, even though I think we technically can't taste anything above 100 IBUs. But there was one version of Stone's Ruination IPA that I had that was like this. I don't remember which version it was. They've had like a million of them, but this is a pretty vivid memory. I was sitting in my college apartment drinking this beer, and my tongue started going numb from the bitterness, like you get from like really spicy food. And I thought it was awesome, but I also really like bitter IPAs and very spicy food. But what made the Hop Wars actually interesting was not just cranking the bitterness. Breweries were trying to get the full spectrum of hop flavor into these beers. Bitterness, aroma, flavor, all of it. And they were coming up with these crazy hop schedules to achieve that. Some of them were actually building contraptions to just continuously add hops throughout the boil to hit every micro unit of time for like 60, 90, 120 minutes straight. And we know now that that was overkill. We've come up with some much simpler, optimized hop schedules now, but at the time it was innovative. And what came out of that era were these big, bold, flavorful, aggressively hoppy beers, bitter on the back of the tongue with enough malt to sit on without being too much. They weren't sweet, they were dry and refreshing and crushable and somewhere around 5 or 6%. These were beers you could sit with and enjoy and have a few of without getting wasted. That was the IPA from the good old days, but somewhere along the lines, something happened to it. Somewhere along the way, the craft beer industry sort of collapsed in on itself. The variety that defined the era, all the different styles that were available, the experimentation, it turned into something a lot more uniform. IPAs were always popular, but they became the only thing. And then they all became the same thing. Every IPA out there is basically the same beer now. I've had this exact conversation with multiple different people on multiple different occasions, completely independently. And it always goes something like this. They say something along the lines of, every beer I see at a bar is always a hazy IPA, and they're all basically the same beer. And look, they're not very far off. There are basically two kinds of IPA out there right now, so let's talk about both of them. Hazy IPAs are the dominant form of the style right now. Probably 90% or more of every beer you see out there is gonna be a hazy. And look, I don't dislike hazies. I actually do kind of like them sometimes. I even crave them sometimes. And if I'm out at a bar and it's the only thing available, I'm gonna drink it. But here's what a hazy IPA actually is. It's a style defined by heavy dry hopping, not a lot of bitterness, and a ton of fruity sweetness from the hops. And it's almost always packaged in a higher ABV, sweeter, denser beer. And that fruity sweetness does its job. It's friendly, it's approachable, it's not very challenging, and that's the point. But that's kind of the problem with hazy IPAs. They're very sweet, and sweet beers typically aren't my thing. And there's a philosophical issue that I just can't get past. You can make a beer, put 0 hops in the boil, dry hop it to all hell, and now you have something with 0 IBUs and you call it an IPA? And I've seen recipes where people do just that, and that just seems wrong. An IPA with no bitterness? Something's missing. This is a West Coast IPA, and this is a little closer to what I'm looking for. West Coast IPAs have more of the full spectrum of hop flavor. The bitterness, the flavor, the aroma, the sharp dry bite on the finish. If there's a West Coast IPA on tap, it's probably what I'm gonna order. West Coast IPA is the granddaddy of the style. A lot of those old school Hop Wars beers I'm talking about were called West Coast IPAs. But here's the thing. If you gave a modern West Coast IPA to someone 15 years ago, they would have called that a double IPA or maybe an imperial. These are big beers. You know, one night a couple of years ago, I went out with some buddies and they were kind of taking it light. They were feeling kind of rough. And so I asked what was going on, and they said they were hungover from the night before. One of the guys even had 7 IPAs. He had a wild night. And I was like, 7 IPAs is a wild night now? But I guess I'm just out of touch. IPAs shouldn't inherently be so big. They didn't used to be. They're 7, 8, 10% sometimes. This one here is on the low end for a modern IPA at 7.3%. And with that much grain in the mash, you can't help but end up with a big, dense, sickly sweet beer. Sometimes when I'm drinking one of these, I can't help but feel like I'm in that scene from Super Troopers.
What's the matter? Your mama didn't teach you how to chug? Come on, Thorn. Come on, Thorn. Oh.
And of course, there's a reason they make them this way. It's marketability. Most people don't love bitter beers. They want something sweet. And so if you want to make a high IBU, aggressively hoppy IPA, but make it approachable and balanced, you add a shit ton of sweetness. It just makes commercial sense. I get it. But IPAs aren't supposed to be balanced. That's the whole point. They're a hoppy beer. If you try to balance an IPA, you don't end up with a balanced IPA. You just make a completely different beer. And that's just not what I want. This is Highland Brewing's AVL IPA. It's labeled a West Coast IPA, which is technically accurate. It's kind of what West Coast IPAs used to be in a sense, but it kind of undersells what it actually is given the modern market. This right here is the closest thing on the market to what I'm looking for. It's the closest thing to an IPA from the good old days that I can actually go out and buy. It's only about 6%, so it's actually almost crushable. The malt bill, according to the website, is American Pilsner and wheat. There's no two-row, there's no crystal malt. So you get this pale, dry, clean malt flavor. It's light, but not thin. And the wheat adds a whole bunch of body and heft without adding a whole bunch of sweetness. And the hop character is across the board. There's bitterness, there's fruity flavor, there's aroma. There's that sharp bitterness on the back of the tongue that I find so refreshing. And the only sweetness in the beer is from the hops, which is the only sweetness an IPA should have. Now, it's not perfect, especially in the context of an old school Hop Wars style beer. It's not quite hoppy enough for me. It's only about 60 IBUs, which I get it. It's still a commercial beer. It needs to be balanced enough for people to actually buy. And the hops they're using are the new age tropical style of hops, mango, papaya, that sort of a thing, which isn't bad. I actually really like that. It's just not what they used in the old school Hop Wars style IPAs. Grapefruity, citrusy hops were all that was available back then, and so that's just what IPAs tasted like. And that's not to say that was better or that tropical hops are worse, but nostalgia's a thing. And so this beer, this grain bill, this philosophy, this approach, it gave me a blueprint. And so I took it and I ran with it. And I made something incredible from it. And that something is my House IPA. It's the IPA I keep on tap all the time. And it's what the next video is about. I miss the hop wars. I miss being able to go to a bar and have 100 different beers on tap, and each one being a completely different experience. And yeah, most of them were IPAs back then too, but each IPA was its own thing. Different hops, different malt profiles, different ratio of bitterness to flavor to aroma. You could have 5 IPAs in a sitting, and each one would be something different. And specifically, I missed that old school hop war style of IPA. And for a long time, I thought it was just gone. Now, I'm not here to tell you that the craft beer industry is doing it wrong. I've got another video on the topic if you want to hear my full thoughts on the subject, but they're just doing what people want. And from a business perspective, that makes sense. But I'm a home brewer, and that means I don't need the industry to cater to me. I can make it myself. Everything the AVL IPA is doing, the dryness, the full hop spectrum, the bitter sharpness on the back of the tongue, but more of it. Sweetness that comes from the hops. The beer I've been chasing since the hop wars. It might actually be the best beer I've ever had. And I'm gonna walk you through the whole thing in the next video. The recipe, the process, every decision I made that got me here, what it tastes like in the glass. So if you've been missing this kind of IPA as much as I have, don't miss the next one.